It's the word.
The word.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the WRRD Podcast. That's WRRD, Writing, Reading, Recovery, Discovery. And with me today, I have Dr. Fantasy. Philip Chase is here, everybody. The reason I started YouTubing. Philip, how are you?
John, thank you for having me here. I'm doing great. It's good to be sitting down with you and having a chat. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, absolutely. I am a little bit let's see. See, I've been wearing tweed suit jackets since about the seventh grade.
Hmm.
And so when I saw that you and an AP were doing them, because you guys must have seen me at some point. That's all I can come up with, And probably soon you guys will start wearing bandanas too. It's fine. It's fine. It's all right. But just wanted to make mention of that I was
Well,
doing it about 20 years ago or something.
it does show that you had good taste, at least were you when you were in fourth grade, right?
That's right. That's right. Well, we were just chatting before, and the whole reason I started this channel is because, like I said, of Philip and AP and a group of guys and ladies talking about the Malazan Book of the Fallen series, and it was after the Crippled God, and everybody got together, and it was like 8 people, and it was just amazing. So that's why I'm here now. Just as a before preliminary question, Philip, when did you get into the Malazan series?
Oof. Okay, so the first time I read Malazan, I actually don't remember what year it was, but it was a while before I started a YouTube channel, which was in 2020. So I would say at least a couple years before that, if not more. I probably could figure it out because I know that I read. Yeah, I read the Malazan Book of the Fall and the 10 books in that series before I wrote my third book, so I could probably figure out the exact date, but it was somewhere in the 20 teens, I would say. And then when I started my channel, I knew that I had wanted for a while to reread the Malazan Book of the Fallen and read all the other Malazan series as well in order to help me understand the Malazan Book of the Fallen better because I loved it the first time I read it, but I also felt like I think I missed a few things, you know. And I think
Right.
there's more I can get from this series. This is a series that will reward some rereads. So one of the big things I had planned early on in the days of my channel was to do a reread of the Malazan Book of the Fallen, and just happened that this guy named AP Canavan left a comment on a couple of my videos, and got to interacting with him a little bit and realized this guy's he seems kind of smart. He might know a thing or two about about fantasy, and it sort of stopped after a bit. I think I had asked him, "Are you an academic?" And was our last exchange, I asked, "Are you an academic?" Sounds like you might be, and he didn't reply to that. I thought, "Oops, maybe I was being too nosy. I don't know." But maybe I offended him. Who knows? But no word from him. And then I think he found me on Twitter and messaged me on Twitter, and it was weird because I had actually picked up Ian Esselmont's the second book in the let me see if I can find it here. Uh, yes, Dead House. Ah, wait, yeah, Dead House Landing. I picked this book up
Cool
and was
cover.
reading it, and I read the acknowledgments here. Once again, I wish to thank A.P. Canavan for his insight, attention, and discretion, da 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 da, as a pre-reader and editor. I was like, what? That's weird. That's that guy. Is that the same guy that I was interacting with on YouTube
Oh my
and
god.
being acknowledged by Ian Esselmont? That's weird. And I swear to you, not 5 minutes later, AP DM'd me on Twitter and said, "Hey, sorry, I didn't get back to you. I got really busy. Blah blah blah. You know, let's have a chat." And I was like, okay, I just picked up Dead House Landing and I read the acknowledgments and I was like, is that you? And he said, yeah, that's me. So it was like, what? You know? And of course, later realized that he had been an advanced reader for both Esselmont and Steven Erickson, of course, as you know. So that was the beginning of, and he didn't have a YouTube channel then, AP. I would, one of my claims to fame, maybe my greatest claim to fame, is that Steven Erickson and I together pressured AP into starting his Critical Dragon YouTube channel. So it was
Oh
like,
my God.
I said, I'm doing a reread of the series. Do you want to do it with me? And he was like, yeah, okay. So that's how that started basically. And he did the first, I made a video with him, just sort of like introducing him to everybody. Still didn't have a channel. And then I think we had our Gardens of the Moon discussions. So we always did a non-spoiler and then a spoiler. I hosted both the non-spoiler and the spoiler for Gardens of the Moon. And then he started his channel. And for Dead House Gates, I did the non-spoiler, he did the spoiler, and we went that way going forward. So yeah, that was the start of it all. Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. And I'm so glad that you guys bullied him into it because he's got some seriously great content
He
on
really
his channel.
does. I
Yeah.
mean, AP's, for my money, some of the most enriching content you'll find on YouTube really is at a Critical Dragon. I mean, he's got so many just wonderful insights. Especially if you're a Malazan reader, obviously, just his series on the prologues alone is got so much gold in it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so I'm very glad that we convinced him to start his channel, and hopefully he'll be back making videos. He's been a very busy nemesis. And you know when the nemesis is quiet for a while,
Yeah.
that's when he's most dangerous,
Yeah. You
right?
gotta watch out, man.
Something nefarious is being plotted even as we speak, I'm pretty sure. So, yeah.
Maybe a whole paper mache Philip Chase to actually, and then a whole channel
Yeah.
dedicated with that as, whoa, every
Yeah.
video,
Yeah, probably it'll be subject to all kinds of torture and beatings because we know how he is. He has his Dobby there. He admitted when he was with you
Yeah.
what he does to poor Dobby there. It's very cruel. Very cruel. You see what I'm up against.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that you had not finished reading Malazan by the time that you were writing your third book. Now, was that Return? Did I hear that right? Was that Return
Yeah.
to Edan?
Return to Edan. Yeah, I finished Malazan, the Malazan Book of the Fallen before
Yeah,
I wrote the
right.
third book. Yeah. But otherwise, the first two books I wrote before ever reading Malazan. Yeah.
Okay. And did you write that many years after this? Kind of goes into my first question. The third
Kind
after
of.
starting.
Yeah, I started the first two books, or what would become the first two books. I thought of it as one book in the beginning.
Okay.
Back in 2004, I started, and I finished a draft in 2007 because I'm writing in the summers. I'm not writing year round. I'm busy during the semesters. I don't have time to write, unfortunately, but mostly in the summers. And then finished in 2007, tweaked, looked for agents because I thought I would try to publish traditionally for a long time, and finally got an agent in what was really the very end, or technically, really, it was the beginning of 2012. So it took me a long time to get that far, and this agent was fantastic. And he told me this is not one book, it's two books. And so then I made it two books, which took another, couple of years. And by then it was probably 2014 or so. And yeah, then once I finished that, I realized that this is going to be a trilogy and started the third book. But in the meantime, had been reading a lot. I wanted to expand my fantasy reading because I'd read a fair amount. Beforehand, I had read, of course, Tolkien since I was a kid. That was my inspiration. Was reading Lord of the Rings and everything else. But Ursula Le Guin was another big, writers whose Ursi's in my DNA, at least the first four books. And then I had read a handful of others like Tad Williams, Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, and some other things. But I realized I needed to read a lot more contemporary fantasy to know, okay, what's actually being published now? Am I
Right.
writing something that anyone is going to want to read or publish? So I just sort of did. So I didn't know about YouTube then at all. I think YouTube wasn't even around in 2004. I think I'm right on that. certainly there was no booktube at that point. But anyway, I just sort of did searches for like what's the best fantasy? What are the things that people are digging, and Malazan came up on a lot of the lists. So I said, all right, let me try this, knowing nothing at all about it. Nothing. Just that people liked it.
That's kind of cool, man.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I had no community, nobody to talk to, just went on the internet to find the names of fantasy series that people were liking. So I found Abercrombie that way, the first Law series, Mark Lawrence's books, Malazan, Book of the Fallen, Robin Hobb's Realm of the Elderlings, all that stuff I hadn't read prior to, thinking, yeah, maybe I should figure out what people actually like.
Yeah. Well, and what a way to enter Malazan, because I came to Malazan Book of the Fallen as a kind of with a whole bunch of stuff already in me of like it's difficult, it's hard, just like
Mm.
it
I knew
needed
nothing. I knew
needed
nothing.
an editor.
All that, yeah.
Yeah, which I don't agree with, by the way, for the record. But
Yeah.
so
If you
when
ever want to make AP get him boiling, you say, "Oh, I needed an editor."
um so you said you got an agent in 2012.
Yeah, yeah. It was the very end of 2011, but we really got going at the beginning of 2012. Yeah.
So I guess now I write 15, 13, whatever questions on these, and I never end up getting to them all. So it's whatever. They're just screw the outline. But so you said that and made me think because I am about to start this process of querying, and so
Okay.
I have self-published a few titles up to this point. Then I've been working with an editor. AP worked on this book as well for the
Uh-huh.
first part of it, and I'm wondering what you think as far as like how did that end up going for you? You said the agent was great, and then you ended up self-publishing, I believe.
Yes, yeah, yeah, yeah. So to finish that story, yeah, I worked with the agent. He helped me to make the books better before I ever worked with AP, and AP also helped me to make the books even better. But at a certain point, my agent made a pitch just at the beginning of the pandemic or so. Uh, yeah, not 2020. I can't remember exactly when it was, but 2020, 2021 maybe. And the publishing industry was, like a lot of other things, a big mess. It had been a mess before the pandemic, but the pandemic made things a lot worse. So when my agent made the pitch, he sent off the package to various editors that he knows, and by the way, he's very well connected. He's a pretty, I mean, he's I don't know if he still is, but he was the president of Writers House, which is I think the largest literary agency in New York City, in Manhattan. And he doesn't focus necessarily a lot on fantasy, but he Christopher Paolini is one of his clients, right? It's the Aragon.
Wow.
So
Okay.
he knows what he's doing. So I was very fortunate to have even, I mean, I won that lottery, right? Is getting an agent. And the next lottery
Right.
is getting a publisher. And then the next lottery is when the publisher actually backs you up and really promotes your book, unlike most books that they just let wither and die, which is a horrible fate, by the way. That's the worst, in my opinion, but we can talk about that later. So anyway, yeah, he made the pitch. It took about a year for these editors, because everything was in such disarray and things are really broken, for even them to acknowledge they got the pitch, that they got this. And it's not like a yes or no. It's just like, okay, thanks, we got it. It's like a year. I was waiting a year, every day hoping, oh, could this be the day, and
Oh yeah.
and all these publishers are like, well, thanks. We'll get back to you at some point, and I realized, wow, this is really broken, because I also knew that not only was this taking forever, but even in the off chance that one of these publishers would actually want to take on my books, it would be years before they actually are published. It could be years and years, and I have no control over that whatsoever. So I wasn't really keen on that. I felt like these stories were ready to go, and yeah, I was discouraged in a way, in terms of traditional publishing and what could happen there. And also, you may have heard that the kind of thing that I was writing, epic fantasy, has not been exactly what traditional publishers are seeking these days. They're trying to do something different. Those people who are publishing fantasy are not really looking for epic fantasy right now. They're looking.
Romance, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there are always going to be trends, things that come and go.
Right.
And so romantasy, cozy fantasy, whatever, but whatever it was at the time. And we got actually eventually some feedback from some of these editors. And they said, yeah, this is really good. This is great stuff, but not really what we're looking for right now. So I was very okay, if that's how it's going to be. I had a conversation with my agent and I said, what do you think about me self-publishing? And he was very encouraging. He says, yeah, I don't think what you've written is great. And he really believed in the project. He said, what you've written is fantastic and it deserves to be published, but it's not going to be in this climate right now. So I think you should go for it. I think you should self-publish. And by that point, I actually had a bit of a following on YouTube. And so I had maybe a potential audience as well. And so I said, all right, let's do it. And I had to learn a lot. As you know, when you're self-publishing, you're your own marketer, your own, you have to upload things and know how all this works and, et cetera, et cetera. So you're putting on all these different hats in order to make this thing actually happen. And so I had to learn all that. And I'm not the most savvy when it comes to tech stuff at all, but yeah, so I in 2023 decided to go for it and published my actually all three books in the Edan trilogy in within a period of 9 months. So yeah,
Oh man, that's so cool. Thank you so much for sharing that story. Like
yeah,
it's something that I've gone back and forth on for well, since 2020 is when I kind of got slapped over the head by who knows what and decided that being a writer was a good idea.
Mhm.
And so since then I've been kind of going back and forth. I was like, I'll self-publish my first book, but maybe so hearing all that stuff is so valuable.
Yeah.
So
And by the way, too, just so I mean, you probably know
yeah.
this already, but maybe some of your listeners don't know, but self-published authors actually make more money on average than traditionally published authors do these days.
Wow.
Not a lot. No, neither one makes very much on average, but self-published authors actually make slightly more now than traditionally published authors. Most traditionally published authors have to struggle just as much as self-published or indie authors do. And like I said, most publishers do not back the vast majority of their books. They pick a couple winners and they put everything behind those, and everything else you're on your own. They toss you out in the water and say, well, sink or swim. So if that's the case, if I'm most likely I'm not going to win that lottery. I'm not Stephen King or whatever. So if I have to do my own marketing anyway, why
Right.
don't I take the vast majority of the profits instead of allowing the publisher to take 93% of the profits?
Wow. Yeah. Oh my God. Because it's like, yeah, I know a couple traditionally published authors and they still have to do this.
They have to hustle. They have to
Yeah.
hustle just like we do. It's no different except we make more on each sale.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Might be changing my mind after this podcast. I don't know.
I mean, look, you may win the lottery 3 times. You may be the lucky one who
Right.
gets an agent, who has that agent convince a publisher, and who gets the publisher to really back the book. That's the triple lottery win right there. And bless you if it happens.
Well, how long was the span, would you say? Just an estimate from when your agent started uh shopping it around until you were like, all right, 2023, I'm done.
So he made a total of 3 pitches, and the first time was when just the first 2 books were written. So that probably was in 2014, maybe.
Okay.
And then a subsequent pitch, I can't remember exactly when. And then the last pitch was 2021, 2022, somewhere in there. I can't remember exactly. But yeah, it had to have been because ultimately at the end of 2022 is when I had my conversation with him and resolved to publish in 2023. So yeah, so he made a total of 3 pitches. and no takers any of those on any occasion. But lots of nice words, lots of praise. But just this isn't what we want right now. We're not doing epic fantasy these days, so
Okay. So that was like a 9-year process for you.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it was.
Wow.
And I'm actually fine with it because I worked on those books a lot in those
Right.
years. I tried every time I got a round of rejections, I worked on them and made them better. And that was my response to that. So I have no regrets. If I were to do it all over again, though, maybe I would probably just make the decision to self-publish sooner. That would be the only thing I would change, honestly.
Well, I think it's really cool that you had this kind of forced withholding almost. I mean, it would obviously it would be great if you had the foreknowledge not to self-publish
Right.
or to self-publish, sorry, and knowing that you wouldn't. Okay, I'm not going to win the lottery 3 times. Might as well go for it. But it's kind of cool that like, yeah, you had to go through this long kind of all of these different strainers of getting
Yeah.
your super focused work. Like that's what's crazy. I don't know which book it's in or if it's in all the Lord of the Rings books, but there's like a thing from Tolkien at the beginning where he's talking about I stopped when we were at the Mines of Moria, and then I picked up
Yeah.
like I don't know, 15 years later, something. It's something crazy. And
Yeah.
I was what did you do you know what it is? Sorry.
Let's see. I can just I know exactly what you're talking about, and it
So
wasn't
cool.
that many years, but it was a while where he just sort of didn't know what to do, and he had put it down, and then I had to rev up the engine again and start out, back into the story. But yeah, even Tolkien took forever to actually, and he didn't publish in Lord of the Rings at least. The Hobbit came earlier, obviously, but Lord of the Rings, he was in his 50s, I guess, right? At least, yeah, maybe more. But yeah,
Yeah, so cool. And it's kind of that the anti I've been trying this lately with okay, when I started writing, there was this like mentality of you're gonna do 2,000 words a day, and if you don't, you're no good. It's kind of a
oh
very
gosh,
it's not. Listen, I do a lot of self work to try and keep those things at bay, but
yeah,
what I'm saying is, I feel like growing up in this kind of like with this capitalistic mentality, can kind of lead to some of those thoughts of like, okay, I haven't posted, I haven't written my words, I haven't done this, I haven't spent time with the kids. The balance is very, so lately I've been trying to kind of write more things by hand and be like, okay, I'm going to take my time. So
uh-huh,
to see an author like you, have a successful release and kind of take his time about it, to make it as good as it can be and then release it on his own terms. Very, very inspiring. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, I think that that's really cool.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's not a recipe for making a living out of writing, though. I
Right.
will say that. If you really want to make a living at this, and then you need to probably publish at least a book every year, and you can't take your time tinkering with it and making it the best possible book. You just have to get it out there. And also, I'm pretty sure, at least in terms of fantasy, you're better off. My perception at this point is you're better off writing page turners. You're better off writing more plot-driven, fast-paced books rather than really deep, contemplative books, which take longer to write anyway. They take longer to read it usually, and they take longer to write. I think that the majority of readers are probably more interested in the page turner experience than in the deep, contemplative, transformative reading experience. So my advice to somebody is if you're going to try to make a living out of this, that's not what I've done. But if you're going to try to do that, if you're going to do it as a self-published author, especially, you probably need to write a book a year, and it needs to be a probably a page turner, type of book, because that's what seems to get the most sales out in the market. That's my perception anyway. And yeah, that would be my advice if you're going to try to actually make a living out of it, is don't make it too deep, don't make it too difficult to read. People want to relax while they're reading. And that's not, look, that's great. Reading has lots of different purposes. One of them is entertainment and just escape. And a lot of people want that from their reading. So, totally understandable. But that seems to be what sells the most. So I would do just about everything different from what I've done. If I were going to give you advice in terms of like how to make a living as a self-published author, you don't do what I did. Don't spend 2 decades tinkering with your trilogy. You got to have much more output than that. Yeah.
Well, I think that certainly, at least it's more rewarding to have an experience in my reading where I mean, I love a page turner, that's
Hmm.
just it's great, pure dopamine, love it. But
Yeah.
I to have that experience, and the money is like, I've been reading David Foster Wallace lately. Have you read much of his
Oh,
stuff?
cool. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and that's not why I'm wearing the bandana, Philip. Anyway,
Okay.
I did it first. Um, anyway, there's this whole idea where you're writing the entertaining thing or whatever. He ends up getting the success through his writing, and this
Yeah.
acclaim and everything, and it doesn't
Yeah.
bring him the happiness, but
Right.
um the thing that he does often talk about in interviews that does bring him joy is that the book has like it's near infinite, just like nearly perfect,
Uh-huh.
is something that he feels. And so I think to myself, that's better, like to have, like, in the way of Edan, I have not finished it yet, but I got about halfway through it, and the magic in is transformative. It brings you it What it did to me is I was at work and I was listening to it, and
Mhm.
great audiobook narration, by the way.
Oh, that's yeah. Alan's
Alan, yeah,
Walker's so good. Yeah, I love his narration.
very good. And I was listening to the first time somebody, and it just took me into presence
Mm.
where, like, usually I'd listen to like a Ram Dass or Eckhart Tolle or something like that, and it would do that, or Alan Watts. And your
Mm.
book did that though, but in this new way, man. It was it was a transformative experience because you weren't just like, oh, look at my cool fucking magic system and here's the math behind it. You were like, uh, you actually took me as almost like a guided meditation. So it's like
Mm.
to give that to a reader, I feel like is something that I strive for. And like you were saying, it's not something that's gonna the page turners are what's gonna get you the money, but the page turners, I don't think I've gotten that out of one of them, where
Yeah,
I felt different afterwards.
it's a different target, I think. And the target with the page turner is to provide a quick escape, a means of passing the time, just a few laughs, maybe, that kind of thing. Whereas when you're engaging with a Malazan Book of the Fallen or, Wars of Light and Shadow or Realm of the Elderlings or something like that, these deep, big, vast, contemplative series, it's a different target. That's a reading experience from which you will emerge a different person. You will come out of that with a different sense of the universe.
Yeah,
That's what I wanted to try to do because when as a kid, as a 12-year-old kid finishing Lord of the Rings and feeling this, though I had no idea what the word meant, this incredible catharsis. I just had this sense of beauty and sorrow and just love for the world and just couldn't understand what I was feeling, but I knew that I wanted to do this, to feel this again. And if I could possibly do it in my life, to give that same feeling to someone else. That was what I wanted to do when I was 12. I just thought, yeah, that's it right there. So yeah, that's transformative, and I think that's something that people need actually.
hmm.
I think that we need that sense of clarity, that ability to perhaps be a little removed from our struggles, but to engage with them in a made-up world. Uh,
Yeah,
that's a really healthy thing. That's a really good thing that stories can do for us, is to give us a place to go through our struggles, a safe place to do it, and make sense of our lives, and emerge from that experience with a sense of meaning, with a sense of purpose and empowerment. You know, that's really empowering to go through a story and feel that meaning and that beauty and that sense of wonder in the world. So I really, really wanted to do that for people, and hopefully that has happened for some readers, you know. Uh,
Happened for this one. You blew my mind, man. I was like, having a day about it, and you were just talking about having engaging. Oh, that was so beautifully put. You're talking about engaging with our sorrow through this outside kind of, yeah, like, oh man, it's so great. And I feel like it's almost the only way to, like, not avoid loneliness, but like to bridge gaps between us is through like literature that's transformative in that way. Like,
yeah.
um, yeah, it's I remember so I'm a heroin addict, been clean for 8 years this July,
Oh
and
wow.
I
Congratulations.
thank you. And I remember when I was driving in a car with my friend, and like somehow we were both like withdrawing, sick, sweating in the car, and trying to find money. Probably did something awful to get it, but then there was a moment that I remember where we like started laughing at each other for being drug addicts. And like I still remember it today, like as being very uh yeah, this very like even in this like physically withdrawing state, I felt this like relief, this like kind of slackening of the shoulders because
Yeah.
we had spoken this truth to each other. And I feel like, that with that sentence or whatever, uh, well, it was like a paragraph where you were going into the magic and everything was becoming present. And
Mhm.
I feel like that's what I got out of that. So I got to ask you, you have to have some kind of spiritual practice. Maybe you don't, but from reading your book, it seemed like you did, and that the way that you could touch me in that way, and maybe it's just writing, I don't know, or maybe it's teaching for you or whatever. But if you could go into that for me, I would love to hear.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. No, I think you said a bunch of great things there. First of all, I think another thing that stories do for us is they teach us empathy, and that's very important. Very important. But as far as my own, and speaking of empathy, I think that's and compassion, they're at the heart of what I believe, really, in terms of how I want to engage with other people. And essentially, in terms of actually like religious practice, I grew up the son of a pastor. And not only the son, but the grandson and the great grandson of pastors. So it's a family tradition, you could say. And I thought for a while when I was a teenager that I would probably become a pastor as well. Very early into my college years, I realized I didn't believe what I was supposed to believe, at least in the same ways that people talked about believing in Christianity. There were certain things that I questioned, even as a little kid. I pretty sure I did not believe in a literal hell, for example.
Right.
I believe that there was a literal hell, a place where people are tormented forever by a supposedly loving God. That just didn't make sense to me, right? So I was a rebel even as a little kid, in some ways. I was like, wait, this doesn't make sense. This doesn't work. But as by the time was in my early college years, I had to admit to myself that I probably wouldn't be a very good pastor because I was a little more unconventional in my beliefs. Not that I ever consciously had a day where I just sort of rejected it all and said, no, this is all garbage. I don't believe any of this or anything like that. I still have actually a lot of affection for the faith that I grew up in, but um, I don't. I think of a lot of the things in more, let's say, metaphorical terms rather than literal terms. So when I read, for example, just to be more specific about this, if I read the story in Genesis, about Adam and Eve, I read it as I believe a lot of people, even from its earliest as an oral formulaic tale, probably people didn't believe it in such a literal way, right? but I believe there's a lot of metaphors in there, like the tree of knowledge. What's that about? That this is a thing that it raises questions for me. I want to question, I want to investigate, I want to explore. And if you just have one rigid set interpretation, I think you're taking what is a really rich story and you're fossilizing it, right? If when you literalize these old stories, you're fossilizing them and you're taking away the magic, right? That's how I feel anyway. And a lot of that, I found a voice early in my college, like my first year of college, that helped me to arrive at this understanding that I had been groping toward for years, and that was Joseph Campbell, actually. I read the Hero with a Thousand Faces when I was a freshman in college, just on my own, because I think I first saw him on PBS talking to Bill Moyers.
Oh, cool.
Joseph Campbell and the Power of Myth, that series of
Yeah.
interviews he did with Bill Moyers. And I know, I realize a lot of people have poked holes in Joseph Campbell's, hero's journey and blah, blah, blah. I know his reductionist, blah, blah. I know all the criticisms. But that guy just set me on fire with a love for myth. I already loved myths, but he made me understand why I loved them. And it also helped me to articulate to myself my own approach to spirituality. That I believed that these stories had big capital T truths in them, but they weren't necessarily literally true, right? So they have value, but we're meant to think about them. We're meant to treat them as yes, as educational, as moral tales and all that. But there's not just one set interpretation, and that's something that I feel is really important about stories in general, is that there's not one set correct interpretation. This is how I teach too. Look, I want my students to tell me, because they have unique experiences they bring to every story. And they're going to help me learn stuff I didn't realize about a story that I've read maybe 20 times already, but they'll see something I don't see because they have experiences I don't have. So there's great value in learning from that perspective, I think. Somebody who thinks they have all the answers, there's only one way to interpret this story, and this is it, and I know it, that scares me. That kind of certainty, it
Yeah.
scares me. It makes me feel uneasy. That makes me think, what damage are you going to do in the world by insisting that you have the one correct interpretation and everybody else is wrong, and unless they agree with you. So that you can imagine it comes up in the Edan trilogy just a little bit there. Yeah. I don't know. I can't remember what your question was, but I think I may have answered it.
You answered it wonderfully, and I don't remember it either.
Okay.
If I was certain,
Oh,
I'd
my
be up
religious
to.
journey. Yes, yes. Okay, so I actually wasn't finished.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
So I grew up in a Christian household. By the time I was in college, I realized that I was at least unconventional in my approach to the religion that I grew up in. And then I had this incredible opportunity to teach and live in Nepal, which is a predominantly Hindu country with a big infusion of Buddhism.
Oh,
Actually, where
awesome.
the Buddha was born in what is now Nepal, actually, in Lumbini. So yeah, I had this. It is probably the most important experience in my life, having
Mm.
lived over there and learned a a worldview that challenged me in some ways that are just so healthy and changed the way I see the world. But at the same time, I saw a lot of commonalities as well, and just met some incredible people, some very gracious, wonderful people over there. And yeah, so I read a lot about Hinduism and Buddhism. I'm no expert on those things, but I'm very attracted to Buddhist philosophy, and that is something that is very much underlying not just my trilogy, but specifically the magic in the trilogy is very much inspired by Buddhist philosophy. So I have to say that this trilogy would not be what it is without that experience of living in Nepal and getting to know another culture and finding myself in those people, in ways that surprised me and made me grow. And yeah, just an incredible learning experience, and definitely got more than I gave, while I was there. I was there to teach, and I'd like to think I did a decent job of it, but boy, did I learn a lot while I was there.
Oh, that's cool. That's so
Yeah.
cool. And do you believe what do you what do you think about needing a guru if you were a practicing Hindu? Do you I know that that's usually the tradition is you need to find a teacher, but I mean, that's another one of those things maybe that could be the guru could be a book or
Yeah, I mean,
what
the,
do you
the
think?
one of the cool things to me about Hinduism, and to a large degree about Buddhism as well, is it's such a flexible religion. I'd meet people over there who assumed that I was Christian because I was a white guy from America, and would just say, "Hey, yeah, Jesus is great. He's just like, just like Shiva and
That's so cool.
whatever. He's cool. He's another pathway. They're all
Yeah.
pathways." Their flexibility is great. So there are some who would say having a guru is great and important. Others who would say you don't need a guru at all. You can figure things out on your own. So yeah, you find a variety of approaches over there to practicing their faith. And of course, just like here, a lot of them are secular and aren't particularly religious either. So yeah, but yeah, I really came to. At first, I found it difficult to wrap my head around that flexibility because I grew up,
Right.
even though I had kind of left it behind, I grew up in a religious tradition that tends to be much more defined. It tends to be, these are the boundaries of our religion. Here are the beliefs that are prescribed, and you need to stay within that. Don't stray out of that. Whereas in Hinduism, it's like, yeah, go where you want, yeah, poke around over there if you want, yeah, that's cool too. You can believe that, much more flexible, much more, they can absorb other things into their religion in a way that, look, the temples in Nepal, if you go to a supposedly Hindu temple, you'll find among the different gods there statues of the Buddha, right? Or you go to a Buddhist temple and you'll find little Indras or Ganeshas all over the place, and it's like, and they don't care. It's not like there has to be this rigid boundary between the two. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas we tend to be much more like, here's the label, and are you this or that? Are you Protestant or Catholic? Are you, if you're Protestant, are you Presbyterian or are you, what I mean? We tend to have much more defined boundaries, whereas over there it's just all, porous, in a way that I found it difficult to understand at first, and then gradually loosened up a little bit and thought, this is kind of cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
No.
Well, I think I'm going to ask one of the questions now.
All right.
This has been lovely, by the way. Okay. So uh, we actually did a lot of these. So how do you read so much? That's
Oh,
what I want to know. Do you have a schedule for it, like reading from 8 to 10 or something of the sort? Yeah.
yeah.
What's your
Uh,
right reading slash teaching day look like?
so I had an experience way back when I was a grad student when I realized that, and this is ironic because I'm reading a lot as a graduate student working on a PhD in literature, but I realized I was kind of sad, even though I love reading. And I realized it was because I wasn't reading anything just for pleasure. Everything I was reading was assigned. I had to write about it. I had to analyze the heck out of it. I was doing a lot of reading, but I was not reading anything just purely for pleasure. So I just made a promise to myself that I would read at least like a half hour every day for pleasure, whatever it might be, and just something I wanted to read. And I've pretty much been able to stick to that promise. Now, I usually read a lot more than half an hour. I usually read a few hours a day, I would say. And very recently, I started to listen to audiobooks too. It's just a new thing. This old dog has learned a new trick, which is audiobooks. I've been enjoying. I listened to Andy Serkis's narration of The Lord of the Rings. Fantastic. The
Very good.
immensely talented he is. Now I'm listening to the First Law trilogy, which is also amazing. Stephen Pacey is the narrator there, and he's again just vastly talented. This must be actually because of my own audiobook, which you've been listening to, narrated by Alan
Yeah.
Walker. I had tried a couple times and really just crash with audiobooks and just I kept falling asleep. I kept having to rewind because I'd missed stuff, and I was like, this is not working. I'm never gonna listen to audiobooks. Then Alan did The Way of a Dan, and I listened to it and I was riveted and I thought, this is crazy. What I know this story. I don't need him to tell me the story, but I'm having a blast with it. And I thought, maybe I can listen to audiobooks. And maybe I'll start with stories that I'm intimately familiar with. Lord of the Rings, I don't even know how many times I read it. So I just said, okay, let's do Lord of the Rings. And it worked and I loved it. And now I feel like I mean, I'm incredibly pokey when it comes to audiobooks, especially, but in reading in general, I tend to be a slower reader, mainly because I want to absorb what I'm reading. For me, it's really not about quantity at all. I don't even count how many books I read. I'm not knocking anyone who does, because I know a lot of people derive a lot of pride from that, and I think that's great. Um,
Yeah.
but I don't count. I don't care. I'm really much more interested in the reading experience itself and how I'm always engaging just a little bit too with my author brain. Like, wow, that's a really good sentence. Let me read that again. Look how they pulled that off there. Or, wow, that characterization is great. How did that happen there? Let me go back and read that. So I tend to go back a lot and I'm a slow reader. But that's because I'm trying to absorb it, really absorb it. But yeah, I'll read usually, I'm guessing maybe I average 3 hours a day. That's a rough guess.
Okay. Is that between audio and physical?
No, that's just the physical reading.
Straight physical reading. Okay.
The audiobook's something I do mainly when I'm driving, trying to get my daughter somewhere, or when I'm making breakfast in the morning. It's something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that first law narration is spectacular. I feel like I need to reread First Law.
Hmm.
You know, like my first the original trilogy. Because my first go through it's major for the most part plotless. Uh, it's not plotless, but it's different. It's very character focused, and
Yeah.
it doesn't start getting the plot going until like book three. And yeah, I just feel like, but the whole time I was listening to it, that guy is amazing. He and Roy Dotrice was like two of my favorite. The guy who did the Song of Ice and Fire
Oh, okay.
audiobooks.
He narrates that. Okay. Okay.
Have you listened to those? They're very, very
No, so I've
good.
only listened to Alan's narration of The Way Down, Andy Serkis doing Lord of the Rings, and now Stephen Pacey doing First Law. That's all I've done so far. Yeah.
Okay. So,
I'm an infant when it comes to audiobooks. Yeah.
okay. All right. Uh, so when you got the audiobook back, you said you had an experience with the Way of a Dan, where it was like it was new.
Yeah, it was
Is that how it
fun.
felt?
I mean, I
Yeah.
was listening to Alan's interpretation of the characters.
Yeah.
A lot of times it was like, that's not where I would have gone, but I love it. That's because I gave him free reign. I mean, like, you do it the way you want. You're the artist here, and this is your interpretation. This is your performance. And so yeah, I mean, we had an initial meeting where I just basically told him how to pronounce a bunch of the names and everything. And he
Okay.
asked me some questions, but I think that a really good audiobook narrator is a performer, right? And a lot of that experience that you have as someone listening to that performance is on the narrator. I think that's sort of obvious, right? But I just want to give the narrator that credit because it's a performance, just like an actor doing a play. Every actor is going to bring their own spin to that character, and that's what an audiobook narrator does too. Even in terms of like the inflection of the voice or the intonation or how sarcastic do you read, a certain line or there's a lot of things that are part of a performance that can change, from interpretation to interpretation. So I think it's cool that we have audiobooks and that's one way of experiencing a story. I
And
don't, go ahead. Sorry.
you didn't have any specific like this guy does this. You kind of let Alan
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
that.
He decided on the accents, for example. I had no,
Okay.
he did Day Raven with a kind of sounds like a sort of a Luke Skywalker American accent voice. And he does, his Bledla is just so good. I love his Bledla voice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've gotten to Bloodline that. Yeah, very good voice. But
And there's a point where you meet Bledla for the first time, and there's this dialogue with another priest named Bagsack, and that is such a such a great interaction the way Alan does it. If I had to sell somebody on the audiobook, I think that's the scene I would have them listen to is that the Bledla Bagsack back and forth there early on,
oh, it's so good. And then yeah, you get the kind of the thing coming up from the I don't want to spoil it, but there's like a pit.
Yes,
Right.
the
Yeah.
Grudug. You're talking
Okay.
about the Grudug.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, dude, it was so metal. And those two names, Bledla and Bagsack, I was like, okay, we're like we're on like Steven Erickson level here with like, nefarious bread and shit like that. These are good names.
So here's the deal, though. They're actually real names. They're Old English
Oh,
names. Yeah.
oh my God, really?
Yeah.
Bagsack.
I did not make up Bagsack. That's an actual name. That's the Old English version of a one of the Viking invaders. So it sounds different in Norse, but it's close. But that's the Old English version of it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I just thought I need something named Bagsack in my story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, as soon as you come across that name, yeah, okay. It's going in.
Yeah. And even the name of the protagonist I stole from Beowulf, Day Raven.
Yeah, Day Raven.
Yep, it's an Old English name, although I modernized his name. But in Old English, it's Die Raven. But it means Day Raven, and always thought that is the coolest name, but it's just this throwaway character in Beowulf. This dude, this Frankish warrior that Beowulf kills by giving him a bear hug. He just squeezes the life out of him, breaks his ribs, and kills him. And I always thought, wow, Day Raven, what a cool name. What a lame way for a guy named Day Raven to go, This name deserves a story. So that's where I got the name. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. So as far as that goes, taking names from Old English and using them,
Yep.
I know Gene Wolfe did this in the Book of the New Sun with like
He used Latin a lot. Yeah.
oh, was it Latin? I
Latin
thought
and
it was
Greek.
Old English for some reason, but
Not so much. No, not
okay.
English. Yeah. Yeah.
So he was taking like and they all just look like fantasy names, which pissed him off because people would just be like, "Oh yeah, you made
Well,
up a
so
word."
most of
But
most of his characters, the human characters in Book of the New Sun, all have names of saints, actually.
okay,
So yeah, Gene Wolfe being a devout, he was a devout Catholic, and so most of the, or if not all of the human characters have saint names. Yeah,
man,
yeah.
I need to do a video with you on the Book of the New Sun, I guess.
Well, I mean, talk about layers. There's layers and
So
layers
much.
to that one, and all kinds of illusions and symbolism and stuff. And I think it does help, probably to a large degree, if you're deep into Roman Catholicism, honestly, to read that book. Not that you have to be a Roman Catholic to read it, but I think it's really helpful to understand some of the symbolism that Gene Wolfe was using there.
So as far as that method goes, did you use that with any actual like things in the world, like titles? Did you take from Old English and apply them?
All over the place. I mean, so there's a few languages that I used. Old English, and that's for the Mark and Torland and Elland. Their language is based, their names, their place names, all based on Old English. So Torland is the land of towers. The river Ea was a bit of a joke because Ea in Old English means river, so it means the river. But yeah, everything has to be the names of the horses, the characters, everything. In Grimrick, it's all Old Norse based. So Valfoss literally means slaughter by the falls, which is what it says it means in the book. I don't think you've
That's
gotten to
cool.
You haven't gotten to that part yet,
No.
but yeah, there's everything there is Old Norse based. And the names as well. You haven't met Orvandil yet, but Orvandil is a name I stole wholesale from the Eddas. So as I did lots of other names. But then there's the Southwest, where the parent language in this case is mainly Welsh, but also some Irish in terms of the names. I don't know Irish. I did study Welsh though, so it's basically like a more Celtic vibe going on there. Whereas in the East and in Astrolad, Astrolad is where Sequara is from. That's much more South Asian. So I did learn some Nepali while I was in Nepal, and their language and their place names and personal names are based on Nepali. So if you read book two, you'll see actual dialogue in their language being heard by like a person who doesn't know their language. If you spoke Nepali, you could probably make sense of that dialogue, you know.
And did you actually create it like Tolkien?
So I
There's
cheated. I mean, well,
you cheated.
Tolkien did the same thing, actually. He based the sounds of, say, Sindarin on Welsh, or the more High Elven language, he based that on Finnish. So he also had his real world languages that were sources of inspiration for his made up ones. But he actually made whole languages. Like I've given the illusion and I do know what certain words mean, and but it's very limited in terms of the actual like vocabulary and everything else. So I can't say I'd really pulled a Tolkien. I would never go that far, but I think I've gone further than probably most fantasy authors in creating at least the illusion of an actual like several languages in this world, and that there's linguistic consistency within them because I did base them on real world languages. One thing that as a kind of a snob, I guess, but when I read fantasies where I see a bunch of cool sounding names all thrown together on a map, and I think, oh, like, wouldn't you have cultures with different languages, with different sounds in those languages? We don't, there are certain sounds we cannot make because we're English speakers, right? There are certain sounds that we make in English that people like say, and that's why when Japanese people, if they don't grow up speaking English, when they learn English, they have trouble distinguishing between L's and R's, for example, right?
Right.
We have the same thing in English when we learn other languages. So in other words, there are certain sounds that are favored within individual languages and certain patterns that are favored. So in order for me, a place on a map to feel authentic, there needs to be linguistic consistency, right? Like this ought to sound like it all comes from the same language, at least in this corner here. Whereas this corner over here is a different culture and with a different language, so they're going to have a slightly different set of sounds over there, and it's going to feel different, right? So
Right.
I
Wow.
hope that it feels that way when you look at Jormungand and you realize that these different areas of this continent, the languages spoken in the various kingdoms, if there's linguistic consistency there, that it makes sense. At least I hope it feels that way.
It does. And you describing it like that is so helpful, to somebody like me. When I started writing fantasy, I was the guy with the map and like, all right, fucking Shigamundu, and that's this
Yeah,
place. Yeah.
put some apostrophes in there, and
Right.
yeah.
Uh all right. Well, we've got 2 minutes. I'm gonna ask you one more question
Okay.
before we wrap up. Is that all right?
Oh, we can go even longer, but yes,
Okay.
absolutely fine.
Well, I'll see if I have another one. But this one, I did want to get into what the process looked like for you working with a developmental editor. I really like
Oh,
to get into that stuff on the channel. So you and I both had the pleasure of working with AP Canavan as a
uh-huh,
developmental editor.
uh-huh.
I can say for myself that within the first 5 chapters, I was like, "Oh, holy shit, this guy is next level," and I
Yep.
know exactly what my book needs to look like now. And that was just in the first 5 chapters. It changed the whole book for me, and I was able to put a bunch of things together. Anyways, did you have a similar experience? What was it like for you?
Oh yeah, it was great. Well, first of all, did he rename your characters? Because when he gave me notes on some of my characters, like Bagsack, he renamed Bagsack. Can you imagine that? the cheekiness, right? He renamed. Do you know what he renamed him?
What?
Ballsack.
Ball sack.
Every
Ow.
time, every time, every time he wrote a note on bag sack, it was ball sack. So,
No, I when you were just talking about naming conventions, I was thinking about a note that he gave me where he didn't say anything. He just said, wondering where the naming conventions in this world come from because they were just random. And so,
yeah, yeah. He'll call you on stuff. That's what I love about him. So yeah, he had. I can point to specific places in the book that I feel are a lot better because of him. But I'll just tell you one. I'll keep it spoiler free. But there is a certain character that I actually initially had killed off at the end of the first book. And AP said he's not opposed to killing off characters. If it's the right thing to do, he'll say, yeah, you need to do this. But to him, it felt wrong. And he said, no, 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 this doesn't work. This character has more to do. And I thought, well, I mean, how do I have two other books I've written already, and this character does not exist anymore in these books because he's dead at the end of the first book. How am I supposed? And then finally I said, you know what? I think he's actually right. And I had to bring this character back to life and reintroduce this character in the second book and in the third book. And I was only able to do it because, I mean, I could have done it. It would have been a lot harder. But I had another character that I had a younger character whose arc I realized, oh, I can actually give that to the character I'm trying to revive.
Okay.
And so I did. And I had to tweak things. I had to change things to make it really work. But it was surprisingly, that's one thing AP's really good at is not only telling you what he feels you could improve, but giving you elegant um, solutions sometimes for doing
Yeah.
it. This time it was actually my idea to take that other character's arc and hand it over to the character that I had initially killed. And that other character disappeared. Nobody ever will meet that character because he was taken over. Uh, and I got to the end of the third book, and I was so grateful to AP uh, for that advice because that made the ending to some people's favorite scene at the end of Return to Edan could not have happened if I hadn't listened to AP. And just, yeah, he had that vision. He understood that that character had more to do and that it wasn't quite the right move in that moment. And he was like, you could kill him, but not now. This doesn't make sense here. So he has a really good sense of also just the integrity of the story, just little things that you don't necessarily see, but with an outside expert pair of eyes, he can see your inconsistencies. He can see where you've done something a little flabby and it needs to be tightened up, So I really appreciated that a lot. And yeah, that was even after I had gotten feedback from my agent that I had worked with and who had done a great job of getting me things to improve. So I had two really great pairs of eyes on that trilogy to really help me make a better story. And I'm so glad. But yeah.
Yeah, that's so cool. That's so cool. I had 12 points of view, and then after AP, I had three.
Huh? I initially, so when I had my first book and gave it to my agent, and he said, "Yeah, I'm going to take you on, but first of all, it's two books, and secondly, you got 20 kingdoms, dude. You got to reduce that to at least like 10. You got to see, you need far fewer kingdoms because people are not going to be able to tell them apart." So that was one of the first things I had to do was simplify the world by consolidating some of those kingdoms. Yeah, yeah,
20. Oh man.
yeah. That was too many. It was too many. I mean,
I
I had ambitious world building ideas. So yeah.
Do they still exist on the fringes? Just not in the book?
No,
No.
some of them just they're gone. They got absorbed
Okay.
to other kingdoms. So there used to be 20 though on that map. Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess I'll just do these two things here. How do we as writers slash self-published authors push through the overstimulation of self-promotion, making content other than writing to keep our heads above water? How do we stay sane in a traditional market that is increasingly difficult to break into and an indie market that requires more of us than we feel we are wired for? In other words, Philip, how do you do it?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I feel like if I weren't doing this for any other reason than I'm crazy and passionate about it, then
Yeah.
it wouldn't make sense. It just wouldn't make any sense. I could not make a living from this the way I'm doing it, and I have no problem with that. That's just the reality. The fact that it's been modestly profitable for me is probably a miracle. But that's not the bottom line for me at all. The bottom line for me is I love writing. I'm passionate about it. And I love having people read the books, and some of them, when they read the books, actually resonate with the story, and I'm able to get the sense that maybe I have done something for someone a little bit, at least, like what Tolkien did for me when I was a 12-year-old kid. That I've had people tell me, yeah, I bawled at the end of your third book. It was just, a very moving experience, and I'm thinking, wow, okay, I did something right there, you know. That to me is why I'm doing this. And it's nice if it can be profitable, but that's if you're going to into writing, period, whether do you think you're going to do it traditionally or self-publishing, and you're doing it for the money, I'm sorry. Look, there are about a million other things you could do to make money. You better be doing it because you're passionate about it, and you just got these stories that have to come out. And that's why you do it. And focusing on that as a process and as just a fulfilling, wonderful thing, to just the act of creation itself is something that it makes me so sad these days with AI and everything, and how many people are using AI to quote unquote write books now. There's nothing fulfilling in that. That's just like eating garbage. It's not, you're not creating. You're taking the best part of that process out of it. And yeah, maybe you're making some money from it. I don't know, but you're taking the best part of it, the creative part, away. Why would you do that? If you see it as a money-making thing, okay, fine. But to me, the value is in the creative process and in the in the feedback, and in getting to hear from people who've read the books and who have this. It's such a privilege, really, whenever somebody leaves a review and I get to read about that person's reaction to the story. It's an immense privilege and a pleasure, and it makes me feel like, okay, I haven't wasted the last 2 decades. I did something that I can be proud of. So that's why I do it. And I'm probably never, if I keep doing it the way I am, and I don't think I can do it any other way, I'm not going to be that bestseller. I'm not going to write those page turners. That's just not why I do it. If other people uh, get satisfaction from that, then fantastic. Good for them. I'm happy for them.
Mm.
But I wanted to do something else here. I wanted to pour myself into these stories in a way that would speak to people in a different way. So that's what I'm trying to do, and so far, it's been a pretty good ride.
Well, it's so beautifully said, Philip. Like I mean, I struggle with this sometimes, which is why I ask most of these questions are just for my own self. But um, what I got from kind of what you just said was it kind of blows my mind because as you were talking, I was like, okay, so it's like the barometer that I have for like overstimulation slash if I whatever, if I'm not enjoying it, then I'm doing it for the wrong reason that day. Like maybe the reason I'm suffering while I'm posting or scrolling or liking or commenting is because I'm not doing it because I want to like have community that day or read. It's because I'm looking for kind of a fix of like recognition almost like and like money later maybe like
Right.
oh I got 200 likes okay that means money later and maybe that's why. Would you agree with that kind of could be a gauge for like overstimulation of or like why I'm feeling that way?
Yeah. I mean, that balance is going to be different for everyone to some degree, though. If you're going to be a writer these days, you do need to put on that marketing hat. But it doesn't have to be gross and transactional. It can be you becoming part of a community that's actually mutually supportive. And that is a beautiful thing. I
Yeah.
wouldn't be nearly as fulfilled as I feel now without the communities that I've become part of. And those are pretty much virtual communities, the YouTube community. And I met a lot of other people, indie authors. There's a nice community on every social media platform you can think of. And I've made some really deep, important friendships on these through these platforms, and I'm very grateful for that because that's been a hugely meaningful part of this journey for me is the friendships and the privilege and the joy of being able to talk about stories, period, but my story as well with these people who are they're just wonderful. They're here because of the same reasons I'm here. They love stories and they love what happens when you get together with some friends and you talk about stories and you learn from each other and the what happens when somebody in the course of a conversation about a book brings up something that I didn't see and that enriches my appreciation of the story is magic. It's just wonderful. And it happens every time I get in a conversation with people on YouTube about whatever it is we're reading together. And I just love it. I absolutely love it. And it's happened even with my own books. Like people have said stuff about my books, and it just sounds like, wow, that's really brilliant. I wish I had meant that, what you're
I
saying
did
right
mean
now?
it.
Yes, of course. I absolutely intended that. No, it's really cool because people will see things that I didn't even see, even about my own writing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just think it's so amazing that like you can feel that through the screen with you, Philip. Like that's why I got into this was because, and that's why that question is so important to me to ask you because I like look to you and your videos as a content creator, as somebody who does this and loves it, and it shows through the screen, man. Like you reached out to me in that Cripple God video, and we're like, no, look, we're not trying to push our books here or whatever. We have books, we all do stuff, but like we're just having a great time. And like if you're not having a great time, maybe you need to look at what you're doing. Maybe you don't love it. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. And by the way, I don't think there's anything wrong either with somebody who's created a platform from discussing books to say,
right.
hey, I wrote a book too. If you want to check it out, here it is. Um, th- there's no other way you're going to get people to look at your book.
Right.
With self-publishing, if you don't do any marketing, you can count your friends and your family members, and you can cut that in half, and that's how many sales you're going to have. So you've got to, and I know it's not natural. It's not natural for me. I'm not a salesperson. I'm terrible at this, to be honest with you. I don't feel at all like a natural. But there's nothing wrong with you having a video on your channel about your book and saying, "Hey guys, let's talk about my book." Invite some friends over. And how else are people going to hear about it?
Right.
Especially if you're a self-published author. There's no other way than to get on social media and yes, you're part of a community, so you're going to talk about other people's books, and you're going to talk about books that everybody knows about that have a broader audience, and you get to know people that way. And some of those people you get to know when you tell them, "Hey, I have a book too. You want to check it out?" are going to be like, "Sure," and they're going to be some of your best advocates. And there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever.
Well, Philip, this has been a transformative conversation for me. And so I really appreciate it. For the last thing, just where can we find you? Where are all the places? Where can we find your books?
Oh gosh, so I'm here on YouTube, Philip Chase, very creative name, although it's sometimes called Philip Chase, the best of fantasy, which is really cheesy, but that's my first videos were all about these books or series that I consider to be the best of fantasy. So that's how the channel name started, I guess. But yeah, I'm on YouTube. I'm on all the other social media like Twitter and Instagram and Blue Sky as Philip Chase 90. So you'll find me there under that. And as far as where to get the books, the physical books are available from basically any online retailer, Amazon, Barnes and Noble here in the States, whatever your retailer is in whatever country you're in. If it's online, they'll probably be able to get a hold of it. But the ebook is Amazon only. I did that through KDP. But the physical book I published through both KDP and Ingram Spark. So the Ingram Spark version, you can get that from wherever, like Barnes and Noble or something like that. And then there is the special edition of The Way of Edan, which is from the Broken Binding. And you have to go to the Broken Binding site for that. And hopefully the next two books will be coming out relatively soon as well there.
Looks
But yeah,
great, by the way. It's
yep.
there behind you, right?
Yeah, this is the cover for the special edition of The Way of Edan. Yeah.
So beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that Renee Agner did this dust jacket, and I think he captured the vibe of Kinsford really well in this. I was delighted with that. But yeah, so yeah, that's me. And there's the audiobook, as we said, that Alan did. That's available through let's see, iTunes and Audible and Amazon. Yeah.
Okay. Well, wonderful. And it has truly been an honor, Philip. And thank you so much for your
Likewise.
time. You have a great
Likewise.
day.
Thank you so much, John. I appreciate it very much.
Bye.